There is a Soviet research facility. It has a couple of huge satellites.
It's another NASA video, you guys.
Debris, lost shuttlecrafts and stations. There's a lot up there.
Starting off our list today, we have Mir. While that may sound like the name of some kind of cute cartoon character, it's actually the name of a decommissioned, deorbited space station that operated in low Earth orbit from 1986 to 2001, originally by the Soviet Union and later by Russia. At the time of its launch, Mir was the largest artificial satellite in orbit, succeeded by the International Space Station, which was launched in 1998 and is still in operation to this day. Mir was designed to be a long-term research station, and it was. It held the record for the longest single human spaceflight at 3,644 lonely days until that record was again surpassed by an astronaut aboard the ISS. The Mir station was launched in an effort to improve the human understanding of the difficulties one might face while attempting to establish a permanent presence in space. Of course, there is no way NASA would go anywhere near this thing during its years of operation because it would most certainly lead to extreme conflict between the United States and Russia. On March 23rd of 2001, the Mir was brought out of orbit and back into our atmosphere, and it was destroyed completely upon re-entry.
The first beings to fly up into space weren't human. In the early years of the space race, the Albert Project was an American initiative that aimed to study the effects of space travel on living organisms. This involved sending a bunch of animals like monkeys, mice, fruit flies on suborbital flights to study what would happen to their bodies during spaceflight. The project was named after a monkey named Albert, and then every monkey thereafter they tried to send up to space also received the name Albert as well, which led to the project unofficially being named the Albert Project. Albert II became the first primate to reach space on June 4th, 1949, but he died on re-entry. The project was pretty cruel, as most of these animals never made it home alive, but they played a big role in the advancement of spacecraft technology. But the thing is, a bunch of these crafts that never made it back home are said to be quietly floating around up there, with their animal occupants still inside. Basically, forever trapped in space coffins. Pretty creepy.
Next up, we have the Salyut program, a series of Soviet space stations, 7 to be exact, launched between the years of 1971 and 1982, with Salyut 1 being the world's first ever space station to be launched into orbit. With a crew of 3 Russian astronauts, the station set a then record with a 24-day long manned mission to space. Unfortunately, however, the crew never made it home, as they were all killed due to the sudden depressurization of their spacecraft, the Soyuz 11, designed to shuttle the astronauts home shortly before their re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Salyut 2 through 7 were launched in the years that followed, with number 6 and 7 eventually becoming the main research stations of the Soviets during the time period. Out of the total 1,697 days in which the stations were occupied, 6 and 7 accounted for 1,499. Safe to say that is the majority. It's just math. These two stations were also the first to utilize 2 docking ports, which allowed for both shuttle spacecrafts and Progress spacecrafts used to resupply the station to be docked at the same time, allowing for the first ever instance of continuous occupation of a space station. That rhymes. In 1986, the Salyut program ended and all stations were decommissioned and destroyed, either on purpose or accidentally.
Amongst all the satellites orbiting around Earth, could one of them be of extraterrestrial origin? Well, some people think there is one, an object that has been referred to as the Black Knight satellite. The legend of the Black Knight satellite really started gaining traction in 1954 when newspapers reported that an unknown object was detected in Earth's orbit. At the time, both the United States and the Soviet Union were in the early stages of their space programs, and any unidentified object in space drew a lot of attention. I suppose that's still the case today, but In the 60s, photographs taken by a polar orbiting satellite showed a strange dark object. These images added to the mystery and were quickly linked to the idea of the Black Knight satellite. And over the years, more sightings and unexplained signals picked up by radio operators were also attributed to the Black Knight satellite conspiracy. The theory is that the Black Knight has been orbiting Earth for thousands of years, placed there by some advanced alien civilization. Some claim that it has been transmitting signals to Earth, and that these signals have been intercepted and analyzed by space agencies, including NASA, who is covering up the presence of the Black Knight to avoid public panic and to control information about extraterrestrial technology. NASA's official explanation is that the object is just a piece of space debris, but who's to say?
Next up we have Skylab, an American space station, America's first space station actually, which was sent into orbit on May 14th of 1973. It was occupied until July of 1979 and it was operated by 4 separate crews, Skylab 1, 2, 3, and 4. Prior to the station's launch, 3 astronauts underwent simulation missions that mimicked the conditions they would face while in orbit. When the station was launched, it was inhabited by 3 astronauts and 2 garden spiders who were purposefully launched with the ship into low orbit so that their behaviors could be studied. At one point in time, NASA actually considered sending wine up to the space station, but they eventually changed their minds after receiving backlash from the public. Lame public. When the spacecraft was decommissioned in 1970, it was brought out of orbit and it disintegrated upon re-entry into the atmosphere, scattering debris across both the Indian Ocean and Western Australia, who went on to send NASA a fine of $400 for littering.
The Kosmos 557 was a bit of an embarrassment for the Russian space program. It launched on May 11, 1973. The goal was to send a space station into orbit, similar to what the United States was doing with its Skylab program. Kosmos 557 was supposed to become a part of the Salyut series of space stations, which were used for scientific experiments and to test long-term human stays in space, but shortly after launch the space station experienced some technical problems. There were issues with its flight control system, which meant it couldn't maintain its proper orbit and quickly lost altitude. Within a week, it fell back into Earth's atmosphere and burned up. The craft had been picked up on Western radar though, but not wanting anyone to know that this was a failure of their Salyut program, they disguised the launch, calling it the Kosmos 557. Didn't come out till much later that it was actually part of the Salyut program.
Next up we have the Tiangong-1, China's very first prototype space station that orbited Earth from 2011 to 2018, and it was used as a crew laboratory as well as an experimental test bed to demonstrate orbital maneuvers and docking capabilities. When the space station was launched on September 19th of 2011, it was unmanned. It wasn't until November of that same year that astronauts first stepped foot on the station outside of Earth's atmosphere. In June of 2012, the original crew of the Tiangong was replaced with another, and in June of 2013, a new crew arrived that included China's very first female astronauts, Liu Yang and Wang Yaping. In total, the space station was manned for a span of 2 years. On March 21st of 2016, China announced that the Tiangong-1 had officially ended its service, and in September of 2016, they admitted that they had actually lost control of the station altogether. And on April 2nd of 2018, the Tiangong underwent an uncontrollable re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, and it disintegrated over the southern Pacific Ocean.
And next came the Tiangong-2. The Tiangong-2 was China's second space station, launched on September 15th of 2016. Tiangong-2 is designed to accommodate 2 astronauts for missions lasting up to 30 days. The station was equipped with life support systems, scientific instruments, and equipment for conducting experiments in microgravity. The first and only manned mission to Tiangong-2, Shenzhou 11, launched on October of 2016. 2 astronauts, Jing Hangping and Cheng Dong, lived on the space station for 30 days. They did a number of experiments like studying the effects of space on the human body, they grew plants, tested new technology for future space missions. After the mission, Tiangong-2 continued to operate for several months, performing additional experiments and serving as a platform for testing new space technology. In July of 2019, China deorbited Tiangong-2, re-entering Earth's atmosphere and burning up over the South Pacific.
Next up we have the Almaz, yet another Soviet-Russian space program. But what sets this particular space program apart is the fact that it was a super secret Soviet military space program that begun in the early 1960s. 3 crewed military reconnaissance space stations were launched as part of the program, with the first being sent into orbit in 1973 and the last in 1976. Here's the thing. Remember how I told you that there were 7 Salyut space stations? Well, I lied. Kind of, because 3 of those were actually Almaz space stations disguised as research stations. Fancy that. Salyuts 2, 3, and 5 were actually used for military purposes. Well, Salyuts 3 and 5 were because Salyuts 2, aka Almaz 1, failed pretty shortly after achieving orbit. But Salyuts 3 and 5, aka Almaz 2 and 3, conducted relatively successful crew testing. That is, until 1987. It was deemed by the Soviet Ministry of Defense that the time and resources being consumed by the station far outweighed the benefits of the mission. Again, NASA would not go near these because that would mean international conflict. The space stations were decommissioned and the program was abandoned.
So what's kept NASA away from the moon for such a long time? Well, a mysterious hidden facility operated not by humans, but by extraterrestrial beings, of course. Now, there are people who really think this is a thing, like the notorious conspiracy theorist David Icke, for example. Before we all roll our eyes and dismiss it entirely, though, let's just entertain this for a moment, because that's what we're here to do, after all. The universe is vast, it's full of mysteries, so who's to say what might actually be out there? Have there been photos of some abandoned alien base on the moon, or any statement of one existing? No, but hey, you know, absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence, right? Maybe this supposed lunar base is just really good at staying hidden, camouflaged. Maybe it's tucked away in some remote crater, or NASA just didn't know what to make of it and it's being kept a secret. But of course, it's worth mentioning that extraordinary claims do require extraordinary evidence. And so far, the evidence for a secret alien lunar base is about as thin as the atmosphere of the moon. But hey, you know, who knows? Stranger things have happened, right? Well, we hope you've enjoyed this latest episode in our NASA space saga
Yes.
we've been doing the past little while.
If you get us to 1 million views, we will wear space outfits.
Will we? I will. Sure.
Yeah.
Why not? 500,000 views, I'll do that.
Okay, cool.
Well, we'll catch you in the next one. I've been your host, James.
I've been your host, Hannah.
Catch you next time.
Yeah.